Welcome to Your Ultimate Life podcast, where we help you break free from mediocrity and create a life of purpose, prosperity, and joy. Get your free video series at yourultimatelife.ca.
Hello there, and welcome to this episode of Your Ultimate Life, the podcast dedicated exclusively to helping you create a life of purpose, prosperity, and joy by serving with your gifts and with your life experience. I'm grateful today to have a special guest with us, Gary. Gary, welcome to the show.
Well, Kellen, thanks for having me here. This is going to be fun. I'm looking forward to this.
Me too. And, we just had a brief but wonderful discussion about some spectacular things that you're up to, going up in the Space Center in New Mexico, and showed me some things I haven't seen. But I'd like to start with a question that's important to you and me. And I'd like you to tell the audience, how does Gary add good to the world?
Well, I help people. I developed the software that gives people the words to tell the world who they are. And that is so powerful, because when you know who you are, you know it helps you figure out what your passion is, what your purpose is, what your direction is. And nothing better than living in alignment with your passion, right? Because when you have passion for something, it gives you the energy that you need to pursue it. So the first step in figuring all that out is knowing what your why is. And that's what my software does. So I think that's how I contribute the most.
I love that. And we've had a chance to visit briefly before. Finding out your why, like what really drives you, is key. It gives you energy to overcome obstacles and not be, discouraged and quit and that sort of thing. And the idea of developing software to do that is fascinating. So talk a little bit more about two things. One, what drove you to spend the effort to develop it? And then tell us a little about how it works.
Well, I'm overly qualified to do this because for the last 32 years, I was a dentist. And so somehow that seems like it qualifies me, but actually it doesn't at all. And to be honest, Kellen, it's not something that I really wanted to do or ever thought I would do or set out to do. I was a dentist that the advice that I was given when I got out of dental school was build a great product and people will come. I'm sure many of your listeners have heard that. Go out and do the best job you can and people will naturally and mysteriously find you. And so I spent 20 years doing that, reaching the highest levels you could go to in dentistry, building a beautiful practice, buying all the technology, training with the best mentors, to only blend in with everybody else who said, yeah, I'm a dentist too. Drove me crazy, Kellen. I had worked so hard to become a premier dentist, and I didn't stand out. And my practice wasn't growing like I thought it would. And that's when I heard about the concept of why. I saw Simon Sinek's TED Talk, and 100 million people have now seen that. And so probably a lot of your listeners have. And
for those that don't know, it's start with why.
Start with why.
It's a beautiful talk, TED Talk, so look it up on YouTube. Anyway, go ahead, please.
Well, yeah, it's a great TED Talk. It's a great concept, but if you don't know your why, it doesn't have any value. It's just a concept. And essentially all it did for me was piss me off, because I knew I needed to know my why. I knew everything was based on my why, yet I couldn't figure out my why. And so I became obsessed with that. And that's when I called Simon. I said, hey, I need you to help me discover my why. He and I spent about 8 months together going back through my life looking for clues, and I finally figured out my why. My why is to find a better way and then share it. I have so many patents and products and inventions that are all better ways of doing things, and then I share them with the world. That's what my life has always been about. So in my practice, we stop talking about what we do, crowns, bridges, fillings, all that fun stuff, and we start talking about what we believe and why we do what we do. Life is better when you have great teeth. In fact, you can't have a great life with bad teeth. And that's when my practice really started to take off. We went from just getting by to having abundance. And as that happened, I started getting calls from other dentists that said, hey, can you help me do what you did? So I had to figure out a process for doing that. And since my why is to find a better way, I went back and figured out what Simon was trying to do, and I made it better. So instead of taking 6 or 8 or 10 months, I could sit down with you, Kellen, and help you discover your why in about an hour. And I started doing this for anybody that would let me. I did it for thousands of people for free on stages, on Skype, all over the world. And I started to notice patterns and trends and similarities. And I figured out that there's only 9 different whys. And once I figured that out, then I could teach other people to do what I was doing. Then I could get more data. And then I developed the algorithm where I created the software where you could go online and discover your why in about 5 minutes. And so that was back in 2016. And then recently we launched our new software, which you took, that finds your why, your how, your what, and builds your message for you in about 8 minutes. And so to answer your question, Kellen, this isn't something I set out to do. This is not something I wanted to do. My practice had taken off. I was doing very, very well, working 3 days a week, making a lot of money, having a great practice. And this was not something that I planned, but it's something I feel like I have to do because it solves so many problems for people when they know who they are. And that's really why I'm doing this. It was not by design, but just by something that I figured out. And I feel like it has so much value that I have to go do this.
So I believe that. And you say not by design. And I understand you didn't set out. You went to school and you became a dentist. And in the process of being a dentist, the I figure out a better way-ness that is Gary was operative. So you went through that and you figured out a better way to discover your talking about what you do for people. In other words, what they get. And the crowns, bridges, fillings, that is the activity. But the reason they go to a dentist might be to get rid of pain, but it is so that they look and feel good. In other words, it connects them to who they want to be and how they want to show up. And using that language is so important. So people said, I want to go to the guy that makes me feel like $1 million. I want to go to the guy that gives me my life back and my smile and my heart and my confidence and my capability and that sort of thing. And of course, then people would be crawling all over themselves to get to you, I guess.
Yeah, that it definitely changed the conversations. So if for your listeners, if you talk about what you do, you blend in with everyone else who does what you do. So if I say to you, yeah, Kellen, I'm a dentist. Well, right away your mind goes to, well, yeah, I know 5 dentists, or, you lump me in with all the other people that are a dentist. And that's with any industry, whether that's, an accountant or a lawyer or a CEO or whatever it is. If you talk about what you do, you blend in with everyone else who does what you do. But when you focus on why you do what you do, you stand out from everyone else who does what you do. And when we talk about why in that context, it's really about what you believe, right? You believe, and for the listeners, Kellen's why is to contribute to a greater cause, add value, have an impact in the lives of others. How he does that is by challenging the status quo, thinking differently, pushing the limits, but ultimately what he brings is a better way to move forward. And so if you say, well, yeah, I'm a host of a podcast or I'm host of a radio show. Yeah, I could blend you in with all the other ones that I know, but you talk more about having an impact, maximizing your impact, connecting with 250 million people. That doesn't happen by just focusing on you. That happens because you focus on everybody else. Because when other people have a bigger impact, you feel like you have a bigger impact. Is that right?
Of course it is. And that's one of the reasons I love having you and others. But today we're you. So you here on the show, because you were just telling me right before we started that I asked you, what was the most interesting thing that happened? And you talked about an airplane ride, and you talked about having leaders and governors and other people, business leaders on there to go to different cities. And in going to those different cities, what were you doing in those cities?
Well, I always look for a better way. So your why is what you bring everywhere you go. So I'm always looking for a better way. I didn't choose it. I can't turn it off. I go to bed thinking about a better way, and I wake up thinking about a better way, and I'm rarely satisfied. So I'm always trying to do things better. And what's interesting about the way my brain works, and others with this same why, is that we're always looking and cataloging better ways to do things so that at some point maybe we'll need to utilize that. And so it was fascinating going to the spaceport down in Las Cruces, or outside of Las Cruces, New Mexico. We got to spend some time with the astronauts. We got to spend some time with the mechanics. We got to see all the new technology that they have. And what was fascinating about it is they don't have anybody to follow. They don't have anyone they can say, well, they did it this way. Well, no one's ever done it. So everything was new. In fact, I noticed on the side of the mothership is the one that carries the spaceship up to 50,000 feet and then lets it go. And then it rockets up into space. I noticed all these rough spots on it, like bubbly kind of things. And I said, well, I can't believe that it goes that high and that fast and it's not smoother. And the mechanic said, well, the reason it's like that is because we're always looking for a better way. We're always trying to improve things. So they have to cut troughs into it and build things into the side of it to test stuff out because there's no one to follow. Something didn't work. Well, we got to try this. And then they just kind of cover it almost with a putty. It was interesting. It wasn't as smooth and pretty and perfect as I was expecting because they're always trying to find something better.
So let's do that right there. A lot of times people feel like they're worried about failing, they're worried about what others are going to think, they're worried about judgments, they're worried about that sort of thing. But pioneers, people that are following that voice, following their why, everything's an experiment. And so you and every one of the listeners, you're gonna feel the yearning. You're gonna feel the yearning to follow your why, and you're either gonna say yes or no, and it'll either frighten you to death and you won't do it, or you're gonna go do it. And what I just heard, and we hadn't talked about this, is fabulous. It's gonna be a test. You're gonna try different things, and lots of it's gonna have rough edges, and you can't worry about that. There's a phrase that I heard somewhere: instead of ready, aim, fire, it's ready, fire, steer. And so you get on the thing and get going with it. Now, I have a question. You said you noticed patterns as you were helping people through this process to figure out their why, and then their why and their what and some other things. One of the things that I thought, and others might think too, is, well, I noticed patterns, and so then I reduced it to only 9 whys, and someone's going to think, well, wait a minute, I won't quite fit in one of those boxes. So tell me what you would say to someone who would think that, it won't quite work. It won't quite work for me because I'm going to be box 2.5 or something like that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. There's about 365,000 combinations. So they will be one out of 365,000. But because of the YOS, the software that I created actually goes 9 levels deep. And so it goes a lot deeper than just your why, how, and what. But it is very accurate. So here's how I did it. And once I figured out my own why, I became obsessed with helping others figure out their. Your why is housed in the limbic part of your brain. So if we could just, if you were at a place where you could draw something, if you drew a big circle and a little circle inside it, like a bullseye, the outer part of your brain is called the neocortex. All right, that's the part of the brain that's responsible for rational and analytical thought and language. What that means is it can understand a lot of data, facts, figures, features. They're all understood at the level of the neocortex, but it doesn't drive behavior, meaning decision-making doesn't happen there. So you may tell somebody all the facts, figures, and features of your business or your product or your service or your cause, and they'll say, yeah, Kellen, I understand what you're saying, but let me think about it. Let me think about it. So if you hear, let me think about it, that means you connected at the level of the neocortex. The inner part of the brain, that's the part of the brain that's responsible for feelings like loyalty and trust. 100% of decision-making happens there. And so, but it doesn't have the capacity for language. So you can't tell somebody why you feel a certain way. You just do, right? Why do you love your spouse or significant other or your child? You can't say why you do. You just know that you feel that way. That's where your why is housed. So for me to get to the why, I had to access the limbic brain through stories. So I would have people tell me stories after story after story. And then I learned to find the pattern in the story. And they would tell me the same story over and over with different people in it. And I could see that pattern. And that's where the why was. But once I did this so many thousands of times, I started to notice I started hearing the same story over and over and over. And that's where the 9 whys came from. And so once you discover your why, how, and what, it puts it all together for you. It gives you the words to clearly articulate who you are and why you do what you do. And so the question, it's funny you asked that question because I've never seen 2 people in any group ever have the same why, how, and what, all 9 levels deep. Except I spoke at this conference in Mexico a few months ago, and a guy was there, one of the doctors was there with his kids, and he had his kids take the YOS discovery, and he and his daughter had the same 9 all the way through, the exact same. And I don't know what the odds of that are. Got to be 1 in a few billion.
Yeah, I don't know. Amazing. Wow.
And so I asked him about, are you similar to your daughter? And he goes, we are exactly alike. In fact, she's on my exact trajectory that I was on. Same schools, same grades, same everything, just 25 years behind me.
Right.
And I don't really run into the problem of people feeling like, except for one of the whys. One of the whys is the why of challenge. Challenge the status quo, think differently. They don't want to be put in a box. They don't even want to be put in the box of being outside the box. They don't want to be put in the box of there is no box. Well, I don't want that box either. Well, that's not a box. I know, but I don't want that box. So it's really funny to connect with them because they're going to challenge me on everything. But in general, the point really isn't to challenge it. Just see if it feels right. Because once you know it, that's the whole point.
Well, that's the feeling level. Yeah, you talked about getting down to the feelings. And I wasn't even suggesting that there wouldn't be a combination that would make sense. But when people say 9, people, well, there's so many people, I'll be different. But anyway, let's get to the implications of this. So you've created a way for me and everybody to take the time to answer some questions and do some stuff in this assessment and then give language. And one of the things you said to start with I really liked was give language, give me the ability to express or to describe or to explain or to understand in a way that I hadn't before. And having access to that is not just, okay, now I can do that, but it activates and touches a feeling in me, in that limbic part of me that says, oh, it's like coming home. Now I feel this thing and I understand, and you can refer to that again and again to explain and to motivate yourself and to keep moving forward. Is that the kind of experience you're talking about?
You hit it right on the head. The first step in peak performance is self-awareness. Got to know who you are. And the first awareness is knowing what your why is. Why you do what you do. And you hit it right on the head, because what the YOS discovery does is it gives you the words to tell the world who you are. You've probably felt it. You've probably sensed it. But sensing, felt, kind of, sort of, maybe, I think, doesn't help you very much. Knowing is what helps you. Knowing is what gives you confidence. When you can say it, you know it. If you can't say it, you don't know it. And that's really the important part, because if you don't know it, you can't use it for anything. It's funny. I'll get people when I speak at events, invariably somebody will raise their hand and they'll say, hey, Gary, is your why God-given or is it environmental? So I want you to think for a minute, Kellen. You're on stage. There's 1,000 people in the audience. And no matter how you answer that question, you're going to upset at least half of the audience.
Right.
So how do you answer that question, right? I always answer it as yes. I don't know. It doesn't matter. I can't prove anything. I can tell you what I believe, but I don't have any way to prove that. But the point is, it doesn't matter where it comes from. It matters what it is so that you can use it.
I was going to say, who cares? Like, who cares what the answer is? If you don't know what it is, it doesn't matter where it came from. And if you do know what it is, the only thing that matters is what you do with it anyway. And so I can have this revelation and know, and if I don't go do something, create a movement, write a book, go serve, go do something, who cares? I'll go to my deathbed wishing I had and wondering what would have happened if I had taken the action. And so you're creating the ability to give people that tool, to language it, and then to inspire themselves. Like, I can imagine saying that and having that language and having it resonate and land really well is motivating, inspiring. It helps you think and talk better. I ask people those kinds of questions, obviously, as a coach. And you and I both know people spend half an hour trying to describe what they do. Right? And it's never satisfactory. And they've got to add 2 or 3 more paragraphs. And the first thing you say to them, or I do, is, yeah, we got to cut that down to a sentence, or nobody's going to stay with you long enough to figure out whether they care, whether or not you know what you do. Right?
You hit it right there. If we talk about your ultimate life, let's talk about your ultimate life. How do you figure out what the heck to do with your life? So you're listening to Kellen and I talk, and you're thinking, yeah, that all sounds great, but I have no idea what to do with my life. I have no idea where I should spend my time. I have no idea how to even make that choice. So here's the thing. If what you choose to do with your life is in line with your why, your how, and your what, you will love what you do. You will have passion for what you do. And passion is the fuel that gives you the energy to pursue your dreams. Without passion, you give up. With passion, you persevere. So let me say that one more time. If what you choose to do with your life is in line with your why, how, and what we call your YOS, you will love what you do. You will have passion for what you do. So if you're listening and you're trying to figure out what your passion is, find your YOS. Make sure what you choose to do allows you to live that, get valued for that, and you will have a wonderful life. That's how you have your life.
I love that. And I want to talk a little bit about YOS, because someone saying that, hearing that, might not understand. I didn't the first time you said it until I realized it was the word why, and then OS, like operating system. So your why operating system, which is your why, how, and what. So I want you to tell everybody how to do that, because you have a place for people to go. And I absolutely support and encourage every person who listens to this to go do what Gary's going to tell you right now and lean into it, not as a skeptic to say, I'm going to figure out why this doesn't work, but as an opportunity to discover something that might change how you show up, how you feel, and what you can accomplish. So tell everybody how to do that.
Yeah, go to whyinstitute.com, whyinstitute.com, and just click on the thing that says Discover My YOS. It's $97. It's not expensive, but it is invaluable. It will give you the clarity that you're looking for. And here's the challenge, Kellen, is because, I've been on some podcasts and they're like, well, I don't want to feel like I'm selling something. I don't either, but I don't know any other way. I mean, yeah, you can go try to mess with it for a long time and try to figure it out, or you could take 8 minutes and just figure it out. So the point is not, I tried to price it to where it's not a big deal. And then once you have it, now you have it. Versus, I think I'm going to spend the next year trying to figure it out. Just go discover it and then use it in your life. That's the point.
So one of the things to agree with you, I would say this to the audience and in agreement. You, each of us, I won't even say you, each of us, me, I have spent money on programs, courses, ideas, teachers, coaches, products, services all over the place. And there's two things that happen. Either you use it or you don't. Most of the time when I ask people, what have you tried? And they give me a list of things they've done. I say, did you get the results you want? And they say no. And I say, well, there's only two possibilities. Either the material sucked or you didn't use it. And 95% of the time or more, they say, well, I didn't really, fill in the blank. Most of the stuff that people are offering, especially someone as intense and motivated as Gary is, it's real stuff. So the value, like to let $97 stand in the way of an investment for you. And I'm not here, and this is not an affiliate relationship, and I couldn't care less what you do. But because my goal is to help 250 million people discover your real identity and tap into your why, how, and what, like I would say, go do this, go find it, go see it. And Gary and I talked about this before. And, his description of me as someone who creates value and does those things that he described, he's right. And I do that. And that's all I do is work on my goal of 250 million. So don't let the little investment in yourself. You'll spend that more than that on lattes in the month of May. So let's not get fussed about that. So Gary, I want to move off that. So go to that. Why Institute. That's it. Why Institute? WHY, whyinstitute.com. Go read it. Go be skeptical. I don't care. But at the end of the day, you're worth it.
Yeah.
And if it ties you to a purpose that you can chase, even if your life is full of obligations, you can start somewhere. You don't have to jump off a cliff and go do that all in. You can start a little at a time, build a ramp. But when you're motivated by true things, you'll find a way. Tell me some of the other interesting things you're doing. Like you told me about that trip to different cities with leaders to do important things. What else are you doing with this thing that you've created? And I don't believe for a minute, you've said several times, I didn't plan to, da-da-da. This was your calling. You've connected to it, and this is how you're adding good to the world. So tell me more of what that looks like.
Well, here's how the last step happened. So for those listening that are maybe between two things, I was between dentistry and figuring out this why thing. What happened to me, actually, Kellen, is I went to this event called Zozobra. It's in Santa Fe, kind of like a Burning Man type thing, but not like a 6-day drug fest. It's a one-night thing where they burn this big statue type thing. And, it was for a buddy's birthday party. And so I ate and drank a little bit too much, woke up with a headache, took a couple Advil, went back to bed. No big deal. But one of the Advil didn't dissolve, and it lodged in my GI tract, and it burnt a hole right where there was an artery. And I started bleeding internally, and I didn't know it. And I just started feeling crummy. So I drove home. It's about an hour to my house. Actually went to the gym, worked out, got home, and was feeling terrible. And I just started throwing up, and blood was coming out kind of everywhere. And so I went to the ER, and it was a very busy weekend. So I ended up waiting 11 hours.
Holy cow.
By the time they finally admitted me, my blood pressure was 60/30. I'd lost half of my blood. They put me in a room that wasn't private because it was so busy. And, blood in your GI tract acts kind of like a laxative. So you have to go to the restroom all the time. So I get up to go to the restroom, and I locked the door behind me. As soon as I locked the door, I passed out and I hit my head on the sink. And so luckily I woke up, and there was blood everywhere, and I pushed the door, unlocked the door, push it open, and then I pass out again. Next thing I know, I wake up, I'm on this bed. They cut all my clothes off. I had the 2 pads on me. They had to revive me, off to surgery, tried to get to the bleed. They couldn't get to it, so they decided to wait. Did a CAT scan. I don't know if you've ever had a CAT scan, but they pump all that dye in your arm. Well, they blew out my arm, and my arm starts filling up with blood clots. And they do an ultrasound to figure that out. And they said, well, the blood clots are growing into your lungs. And if we don't stop them, you're going to die from the blood clots. But if we try to stop the blood clots, we can't get to the bleed. So you're going to die from the bleed. And I said, well, what are we going to do? And they said, I don't know. And luckily my phone rang right then. And it was a buddy of mine that's a cardiologist at the hospital. And he said, hey, Gary, I saw you were in here, and I don't like what they're going to do. And so he took over, and I was in the ICU for 9 days. A lot of crazy stuff happens in the ICU. I think you've been there yourself before, so you know. You know what I didn't know when I just found out when I was there? There are no showers in the bathrooms of the rooms in the ICU floor. And I didn't know that until I was in there with blood all over me. But the reason is because they don't think you're going to survive. So you don't need a shower. But anyways, obviously, well, what happened is I had to end up going to bed one evening with an IV of heparin, which stops the blood clots, and hope I don't bleed. And I didn't. So then they could start using more blood thinners. And obviously I survived because I'm here. Crazy event, crazy stuff happened. But when I got out, I went back to my practice. And when I started practicing again, one of my patients who's in his mid 80s took me aside and he said, "Hey, Gary, you got a second chance on life here." He says, "When you get to be my age and you look back on your life, are you going to be glad you stayed a dentist? Or are you going to wish you'd taken this Y thing to the world?" I said, "I'm going to wish that I'd taken this Y thing to the world." And he said, "Well, then you know what you need to do." And that's when I sold my practice. And that was about 3.5 years ago. So in the last 3.5 years, what does a dentist know about creating software or having an internet company or speaking at events or building software or any of that? Nothing. So I made a lot of mistakes. And for those of you that are listening, when you discover your YOS, it may make your life easier. It may not make your life easier, depending upon what you learn about yourself and the path that you're currently on. And so I want to encourage you in that it was not easy. It hasn't been easy. I've made so many mistakes, but man, has it been a lot of fun. And I have had unlimited passion, unlimited energy for this. So you make mistakes. So what? So you figure out what doesn't work. So what? So you are on the wrong path temporarily. So what? You hang in there and you'll get to the right path, and you'll get on the path that leads you to where you really want to go. And it's so much more rewarding than being on the wrong path. And I'm sure you can speak to that, Kellen, right? Been on the wrong path.
Yeah, I've had many episodes talking all about that. This is yours. So that's an incredible story. And I love the details, because sometimes it takes these extraordinary wake-up calls to illuminate the opportunity, to allow us to see what is possible in an 80-year-old person who said to you, "Hey," and so every one of you listeners, this is your hey. Yeah. Go to Y Institute. Do whatever you have to do. But the ultimate life, which is this whole show, is about you choosing to serve and add good to the world and get paid with your gifts, your passion, I call them divine gifts, but I think of it as the skills you have, the gifts you have, and your life experience. And when you put those three together, you have an offering that cannot be duplicated, because there's nobody that has walked the same way you have. Gary, go ahead. Please do.
What the world needs, what the world doesn't need is you, and I'm speaking to you, everyone, including myself, trying to be somebody we're not. What the world doesn't need is you muting yourself, you putting on a costume and trying to be like somebody else. What the world needs is you being the best version of you. So what the YOS discovery will do for you is tell you who you are, give you the words to be able to say it. Because what I have found is that most people just don't know. I'm not sure who I am. I'm not sure why I'm here. I'm not sure what I bring. I'm not sure what my gifts are. I don't know how to tell the world what makes me special. So they're stuck in a place of unknowing. But once they know, oh my gosh, the relief, the ability to make a decision, the ability to move forward, the ability to make a choice of what you should be doing with your life goes up dramatically. because you know. And that's where I was getting at before, the kind of sort of think I might sort of know my why a little bit, sort of here, doesn't help you.
No.
There's no power in that. But when you are clear, this is why I do what I do, this is how I bring it to life, and this is what you can count on from me, bam, now you're ready to go. And I'm going to bring it to the world doing this, because this is right in alignment with what I want, what I should be doing. That's why I was put here. Totally different conversation.
Absolutely. And there's two words that came to me. You said relief, and then the other word that came to me is release. So it's a relief and a release of the barriers and the obstacles, a release of your inner energy, a release of your passion, because it doesn't matter anymore. All that noise, all that, all that stuff that keeps you from leaning in to that truth. Gary, I want you to think for just a second, and I'm sure you've been asked this 100 times in all your talks and appearances, as you think about a last thing to say, to add to what you just described, which was masterful, what would you say to someone as they finish listening to our show today together?
Go find yourself. And if it's not with the YOS discovery, just commit to finding you. That's it. It doesn't have to be with the YOS discovery. It'll make it a lot easier for you. But if you just commit to you finding you, it changes so much for you, gives you the power back, gives you the direction back, the passion back, the energy back. And that's what we're all looking for. And just commit, make a commitment right now for you to find you.
I love that, and thank you. And you can always, if you don't do it now, when's the right day? If not now, when? Now is the day. So this is your moment to commit and go do that. And then take advantage of what you learn to go make a difference. Gary, I want to thank you for your passion, for your energy, for the choice you made in that dental office when that guy asked you the question, and for how you're showing up in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Kellen. Thank you for having me here. And I'm looking forward to helping you any way I can to reach 250 million people this year.
Well, I appreciate that. Now, listen, everybody that's watched this, watch it a couple of times. Gary is bubbling and overflowing with passion, determination, and commitment. He spent effort and energy creating something that was outside of his lane because that's what he was driven to do. Everything that he has said, I agree with, I have seen, I have used in my own life, and I can promise you that if you take advantage of this, discover who you really are, what you're about, what you are designed to do, you will move forward and move forward quickly. Create your ultimate life.
Open your heart and this time around.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. We hope that you take it deeply into your heart and decide for yourself how you can create anything you desire. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to this podcast and share it with your friends. As always, we'd love to hear your feedback and topic suggestions. Until tomorrow, this is Your Ultimate Life with host Kellen Flukiger.
Stand with your heart in the sky.